Okay, Philosoph Mortem back with another video on the 7 habits of highly effective people. Habit 1 is be proactive. Being proactive means more than just taking the initiative. As humans, we're responsible for our own lives. In the book, Stephen Covey talks about being responsible, but he breaks down the word as response-able. So this first habit is a lot about not blaming conditions or circumstances for their behavior kind of stuff. The behavior of proactive people is a function of their decisions. On the contrary, an emotionally reactive person will blame everything on their condition. When talking about habit 1, Covey describes how a proactive approach helps to acknowledge a mistake quickly so that instant action can be taken to resolve it instead of waiting for it to become a more serious issue. So Covey discusses that proactive people concentrate on what he calls their circle of influence, which revolves around health, children, problems, and work. Reactive people emphasize their circle of concern, which rotates around their like debt, terrorism, or weather. For long-term productivity, the proactive approach is better because you're focusing on what you can influence, your circle of influence, instead of your circle of concern. These are things that concern you but are out of your control. So the proactive approach would be focusing on your circle of influence, what you can influence. So people with the proactive approach are self-aware, and they know where they lack, and they work on their weaknesses to avoid obstacles. In conclusion, having a proactive approach is all about taking the responsibility of your life. Proactive individuals do not blame their circumstances and plan the future ahead. They do not let external forces influence their behavior. And here's a diagram for the visual learners of the circle of influence and then the circle of concern. Notice how the proactive people have a big circle of influence that they're focused on and a small circle of concern. Reactive people have a huge circle of concern that they're focused on, and they focus a little less on their circle of influence. That's key to the first habit. Pretty much control what you can control. That's the start of the 7 habits. The second law is begin with the end in mind. Stephen Covey says to begin with the end in mind means to begin each day with my deepest values firmly in mind. Then, as the vicissitudes, as the challenges come, I can make my decisions based on those values. I can act with integrity. I don't have to react to the emotion, the circumstance. I can be truly proactive, value-driven, because my values are clear. In the book, Covey talks about beginning with the end in mind in a way of career a lot. Pretty much visualizing everything to the very end and living with this integrity for the rest of your life, and even visualizing your funeral and what they'll say at your funeral. He has an example where there's the prototypical, very successful businessman who, after a while, he doesn't know his wife and kids because he works so hard, and It's the classic question, is that type of thing worth it? Covey says we should even write mission statements for our entire life. He says a personal mission statement based on correct principles becomes a personal constitution, the basis for making major life directing decisions, the basis for making daily decisions in the midst of circumstances and emotions that affect our lives. It empowers individuals with timeless strength in the midst of change. So, beginning with the end in mind is largely about integrity, just knowing who you are, where you want to go, and once you get that down, stuff starts to become a little clearer. And with this clarity, we can manage our time better, which is another huge maxim in this chapter. In this section, in Habit 2, in beginning with the end in mind of time management. Covey says it is possible to be busy, very busy, without being very effective. Another thing he says, management is a bottom line focus. How can I best accomplish certain things? Leadership deals with the top line. What are the things I want to accomplish? Management is efficiency in climbing the ladder of success, and leadership determines whether the ladder is leaning up against the right wall. So time management falls under the beginning with the end in mind as well, because once you start with the end goal in mind, start building your goals, and from there you got to manage your time to get to those goals. Okay, this brings us into habit 3, which is put first things first. Habit 3 is put into practice when you've integrated effective time management and the aforementioned skills into your own personality. It'll help you spend more time in quadrant 2, which is more about crisis prevention, PC activities, which has to do with production capability activities and sustainability, relationship building, recognizing new opportunities, planning, and it also leaves room for recreation. This, according to Stephen Covey, is the optimal state for maintaining balance between productivity and production capability. So, for example, if you spend too much time in quadrant 4 just browsing the internet, you might want to dial that back. In this day and age, there are a myriad of apps and websites that will help you manage your time effectively. This is crucial to habit 3, putting first things first. Of putting first things first, Stephen R. Covey himself says you have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage, pleasantly, smilingly, non-apologetically, to say no to other things. And the way you do that is by having a bigger yes burning inside of you. The enemy of the best is often the good. In the book, Covey gives us an example of application of this. He owned a tech company that was to re-innovate a whole other company's infrastructure, technologically speaking. The project wouldn't have worked out for the company that they were working for. It just wouldn't have. And Stephen turned down a lot of money to say no to a project that would have not been win-win for each side. Long story short, his company was still successful and regained the money back they would have made, plus a lot more. That's the third maxim. Pretty much stay on the path that rings true to you. And right about this time, we hit a paradigm shift. So habit 1 through 3 were about managing yourself. Habit 4 through 6 are going to be more about leading others. Habit 4 is called Think Win-Win. Of this habit, Stephen Covey says, many people think in terms of either or. Either you're nice or you're tough. Win-win requires that you be both. It is a balancing act between courage and consideration. To go for win-win, you not only have to be empathetic, but you also have to be confident. You not only have to be considerate and sensitive, you also have to be brave. To do that, to achieve that balance between courage and consideration, is the essence of real maturity and is fundamental to win-win. Win-win isn't about being nice, nor is it a quick fix technique. It's a character-based code for human interaction and collaboration, says Franklin Covey. Most of us learn to base our self-worth on comparisons and competition. We think about succeeding in terms of someone else failing. If I win, you lose. Or if you win, I lose. Life becomes a zero-sum game. There's only so much pie to go around, and if you get a big piece, there's less for me. It's not fair, and I'm gonna make sure you don't get any more. We all play the game, but how much fun is it really? End quote. That was Franklin Covey's words. So with win-win, it's all about integrity, maturity, and abundance mentality. Stephen Covey says, win-win is a belief in the third alternative. It's not your way or my way. It's a better way, a higher way. He continues, people with a scarcity mentality tend to see everything in terms of win-lose. There's only so much, and if someone else has it, that means there will be less for me. The more principle-centered we become, the more we develop an abundance mentality. The more we are genuinely happy for the successes, well-being, achievements, recognition, and good fortune of other people, we believe their success adds to rather than detracts from our lives. And that's habit 4, think win-win, one of the laws that'll help you in partnerships. The next habit 5, is called seek to understand and then be understood. So there's a couple things I really took from this section. A huge maxim people take out of this section is called empathetic listening. It's not selective listening, ignoring, pretending, attentive listening even, but it's empathetic listening. That's really understanding what the person is trying to get across. There's 4 stages of it. You could mimic back their body language, rephrase what they said, reflect those feelings back, and then at the end you rephrase the content and reflect the feelings to show them that you're truly seeking to understand. Also called empathic listening. Another one people take a lot from is the diagnose before you prescribe. That all locks in with the seeking to understand before being understood. Diagnosing before you prescribe is an interesting one. It's just all about first understanding the problem before we can effectively address the solution. So in the book, Stephen Covey says, like, what if you went to an eye doctor and he's like, oh yeah, just take this. You probably wouldn't go back to him. He didn't even diagnose anything. He just kind of guessed. So it's really about critically thinking about and directing your every action. Franklin D. Roosevelt was quoted as saying, nobody knows how much, or nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care, and that rings true to this habit. Stephen R. Covey was even quoted as saying, if I were to summarize in one sentence the most important principle I have learned in the field of interpersonal relations, it would be this: seek first to understand, then to be understood. That leads us to habit 6, synergize. Of this habit, Franklin Covey actually says, when people begin to interact together genuinely and they're open to each other's influence, they begin to gain new insight. The capability of inventing new approaches is increased exponentially because of differences. The Oxford Dictionary actually says synergize means, it's a verb meaning to combine or coordinate the activity of two or more agents to produce a joint effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. And this is just the classic get along with others, everyone. After the seek first to understand and then be understood, you get in there and synergize. You know you're synergizing when you have a change of heart, feel new energy and excitement, see things in a new way, feel the relationship has transformed. Again, we're talking about these law 4, 5, 6 are really about other people. The first laws 1, 2, 3 are about self-help. But let's get into a quote. Stephen Covey says, synergy is what happens when 1 + 1 = 10 or 100 or even 1,000. It's the profound result when two or more respectful human beings determine to go beyond their preconceived ideas to meet a great challenge. This one is essential, but it's also one of the most straightforward ones. It's the only law that's one word, synergize. And one more quote here. The essence of synergy is to value differences, to respect them, to build on strengths, and to compensate for weaknesses. So here you build your foundation, go into the world. Now you know how to synergize with others. The final law is sharpen your saw. Franklin Covey says sharpen the saw means preserving and enhancing the greatest asset you have, you. It means having a balanced program for self-renewal in the 4 areas of your life: physical, social/emotional, mental, and spiritual. As you renew yourself in each of the 4 areas, you create growth and change in your life. Sharpen the saw keeps you fresh so that you can continue to practice the other 6 habits. You increase your capacity to produce and handle the challenges around you. Without this renewal, the body becomes weak, the mind mechanical, the emotions raw, the spirit insensitive, and the person selfish. This is a simple one on paper, but in practice it can be tough to balance those 4 areas with the mind, keeping up on some studies, spirit, doing like meditation and service, and then heart, keeping your relationships good, and then getting exercise in. So often we can be unbalanced. We'll be all about our relationships and skimp on our studies and nutrition, or we'll be all about our mind and body and neglect the spiritual world or our relationships. So balance is important. Okay, in conclusion, why are the 7 habits of highly effective people important? It's because it reminds us that you can be efficient with tasks and things, but not people. It works on our social and emotional intelligence, and it reminds us to have sustained and lasting success, we need to engage and collaborate with others and continuously improve and renew these capabilities. Franklin Covey says the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is the proven individual effectiveness operating system. Participants develop increased maturity, greater productivity, and the ability to manage themselves. They will come away with the ability to execute critical priorities with laser-like focus and careful planning. So it's huge for individual effectiveness and even team effectiveness. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is the proven team effectiveness operating system as well. Participants increase team engagement, morale, and collaboration. Teams come away with improved skills in communication and relationship building. So would I recommend this book? Yes. Feel the sophomore. I'm out.